Hi guys, welcome back to TV Spoilers. Today I'm going to reveal the horrific accident that left Mariah seriously injured. Sharon is panicking and in a panic upon hearing the police alert about the accident. What's happening to her? Drama erupts in the manhunt. What will happen next? Young and the Restless reveal that the police manhunt wrapped around Ian and Mariah like a tightening iron ring, not only through sirens and blue-red lights ripping across the night, but through this constant sensation of being seen, of being cornered, of having to breathe faster, run faster, decide faster than a frightened mind can safely manage. Mariah stopped being herself the moment everything slid off its track. When the terror of getting caught became a second heartbeat, when thoughts of Dominic, what she had done, what she had risked, what she might have destroyed, could only flare for an instant before being drowned out by the urgent need to keep moving. She drove as if half awake, eyes fixed on the road while her mind felt pressed underwater, panicking harder the more it struggled, growing weaker the more it tried to force calm. Ian stayed close like a shadow, not needing grand speeches to intensify her fear, because his presence alone reminded her that she was trapped inside a chain of terrible choices, and that every second of hesitation could end with handcuffs. That recklessness, that rushing pressure, that gnawing dread chewing through her reflexes pushed Mariah into a severe traffic accident. One brutal instant where sound snapped, where the body was thrown out of its fragile sense of control, where light blinked out and returned as pain, cold and absolute. Mariah survived, but survival did not look like victory. It looked like a sentence carried out in silence. She woke in a hollow space in her head, a vacancy that was not simply forgetting a few details, but losing the most recent version of herself. The memory loss might be temporary or permanent, and that uncertainty made everyone around her swing between hope and despair. For Mariah, the most frightening part was not the physical injury, but the moment she tried to grasp a memory and touched nothing, as if someone had dismantled her life and hidden the most essential pieces. Dominic vanished from her mind like a name that had never existed. Tessa and Sharon became face-loaded with emotion she could not name, leaving her confused by tears, their trembling hands, their desperate attempts to pull her back. She looked at them and did not see home, did not feel familiarity, only a strange pressure that seemed to demand she remember. And because she could not understand it, Mariah resisted by instinct, stepping back, building a cold wall to protect herself from the feeling of being invaded. That empty space was exactly where Ian Ward appeared, as if he had been waiting for this moment with terrible patience. He did not rush in theatrically. He did not need chaos. He watched from a distance at first, measuring Mariah's breathing, her fragility, the way her mind searched for something stable to hold on to, and he recognized a golden opening to reshape reality into something she would have no choice but to accept. He approached carefully, choosing the moments when she was weakest, when she awoke in the middle of the night and could not understand why she was here, why people cried over her, why heavy silence had sat on her chest like stones. Ian offered her a version of the past that had been bent and polished, arranged so every question in Mariah's frightened eyes came with the simplest, most possible answer. He was the only one who stayed, the only one who did not judge, the only one who protected her from people who wanted to use her, trap her, punish her. He cast himself as the life preserver in a flood, yet it was a life preserver with a noose tied to it, because the more she clung, the more he could pull her wherever he wanted. In a mind stripped of its recent memories, coherence becomes addictive. Mariah did not trust Ian because she loved him. She trusted him because his story was organized, because her brain needed a map, because the alternative was terrifying chaos. Ian understood the way some people understand medicine. He did not need Mariah to adore him. He needed her to believe she would collapse without him. Each time Sharon and Tessa tried to reach her with gentleness, with shared history, with pleading eyes, Ian twisted it into a threat inside Mariah's head. They were trying to force something onto her that she could not remember. They were trying to confess her to something. They were trying to decide her truth for her. Her confession became suspicion. Suspicion became defense. She began to distance herself from the people who loved her, not because she hated them, but because she could not bear the vague surge of guilt that rose whenever they mentioned things she could not recall. Her coldness was not cruelty, it was survival. If she did not shut the door, she would shatter under the pressure of feeling she had lost something precious and unforgivable. Sharon and Tessa slipped into a quiet kind of agony. They watched Mariah the way you watch a familiar house that has suddenly gone dark. Same walls, same shape, but no warmth, no recognition, no voice. They tried every possible way to reconnect, choosing softness over force, trying to create safe moments where Mariah would not feel attacked. Still, each step forward ended in rejection. Not always with anger, but with a distance so clean it felt like glass. Being pushed away by the person they loved hurt in a way that made fear multiply. Fear that her memory would never return. Fear that Ian was stealing the reality Mariah would rely on. Fear that the longer this lasted, the deeper the damage would root itself. And those fears were justified. Ian strengthened his body not by blocking doors with his body, but by controlling the story. He planted the idea that every attempt Sharon and Tessa made was emotional manipulation, that their tears were strategy, that their love came with conditions. In memory loss, even a toxic explanation can feel safer than unnamed mystery. Yet every memory does not disappear neatly, no matter how much Ian needed it to. It returned like a tiny shard of glass under the skin, insufficient to form a full picture, but sharp enough to hurt at the worst times. A sound would pass and Mariah would freeze. A rhythm would strike her chest like a knock from inside. A sudden sensation would flood her hands as if she had once held something very small, very alive, something that needed her. These scattered fragments began to undermine Ian's narrative, not through logic, but through an unmistakable feeling that something did not fit. She started watching Ian a second longer than before. She started hearing urgency beneath his calm. She noticed how he was always stepped in between her and Sharon and Tessa, how he always explained her feelings for her, how he always translated their intentions into threats. His protection felt too perfect, too scripted, and that perfection made it suspicious. The tension thickened like fog. No one said it out loud, but everyone lived inside it. Sharon and Tessa tried to be patient, yet patience began to feel like surrender. Mariah tried to anchor herself in Ian's truth, yet each new memory fragment had tugged her in the opposite direction. She lived between two forces, Ian's coherent story, easier to accept, less painful, less drenched in guilt, and a deep internal sense that something horrifying had happened, that she had once loved with her whole soul, that she had once trembled for a child, that she was being led away from herself. That conflict made Mariah unstable in a quiet way, not exploding, but storming behind her eyes. She could seem calm one moment, then choke the next as an incomplete image rose up too sharply. Ian saw the shift and grew restless, because he understood one thing clearly. If she found even one more piece of the truth, his power would crack. Then a dramatic event forced Mariah into a confrontation she could not avoid. The manhunt still hovered over them. Police pressure still sat on every decision like a loaded weight. That haunted atmosphere created a moment where Mariah was being pushed into seeing what Ian had been working so hard to hide. What happened did not solve everything at once, but it hit with the impact of lightning. Mariah touched a memory fragment sharp enough to slice through Ian's carefully arranged story. It was not vague discomfort anymore. It was a sudden violent click in her mind, a jolt that tightened her heart and stole her breath and turned her body cold, as if she had realized she was standing beside the person who had guided her toward the edge. She did not remember everything, but she remembered enough to know there was a name, a child, an action that could not be washed away, and that Ian was not the innocent protector he pretended to be. Her trust in him shook, not gently, but like the floor beneath her was beginning to collapse. Ian recognized the change almost instantly. He looked at Mariah like someone staring at a door that has just cracked open, knowing whatever waits behind it could devour his entire plan. He tightened his control with practiced calm, trying to drag her back into dependence, trying to smooth over the fracture before it spread. But Mariah had begun to see him differently, with the gaze of someone who no longer fully asleep. Sharon and Tessa sensed it too. They felt Mariah hovering at the threshold between forgetting and recovery, between being controlled and standing on her own. No one dared to push too hard. One mistake could make Mariah slam the door shut again, but no one could endure another day of watching Ian pull her farther away. The truth had not returned in full, but its shadow had grown long enough to cover everything. Mariah stood inside her blank spaces with a fragile thread in her hand, as if she had finally found it in the rubble, and she did not know whether pulling it would restore her life or tear it apart completely. Ian, feeling his grip slipping, began calculating his next move in silence that felt colder than the hospital air. Sharon and Tessa held their breath around a thin hope that Mariah would remember the most important piece before Ian could bend it again. And just as Mariah clung to that new shard of memory, before she could fully name what she had realized, Ian moved closer, his eyes darkening, as if he were about to deliver one final truth to lock her into his version of the past. Only this time, Mariah was no longer sure she would believe him, and that single moment of hesitation rang like an alarm, warning that the struggle was about to turn into a battle with no safe way out. On our TV Spoilers channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting perspectives. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.